So I tell you that the mean word duration, let's say for the word opportunity, in the normal stimuli is 600 milliseconds. But the mean word duration for the word opportunity in the vocal fry stimuli is 650 milliseconds. So then you tell me, oh, okay, so the vocal fry stimuli are longer than the normal stimuli for the word opportunity. Because for vocal fry stimuli, the mean word duration for opportunity is 650 milliseconds. And that's bigger than 600 milliseconds. Are you right? Maybe not. Why? Because we need to worry about spread. You've already heard about this a little bit in terms of standard deviation, but let's take a closer look at this. So here we have, let's say we measured 500 durations of some syllable, and what we find is that we have a mean of 300 milliseconds for these 500 durations, and a standard deviation of 25 milliseconds. And so this is what it might look like if we have it plotted. We have around 300 milliseconds, we have about 150 durations are somewhere around there. But then around maybe 275 milliseconds, we have maybe about 100 durations of some duration around there. Very few durations bigger than about 375, very few durations smaller than about 225. So this kind of binned representation of the distribution is called a histogram. This is kind of, you can think of it as like a digital version. We can also get an analog version if I superimpose this curve over it, and you might recognize this curve as the famous bell curve or normal or Gaussian distribution, and indeed it is, and we have a mean around 300, and most of the measurements are around the mean, and then it really tapers off to around 220 milliseconds or so at the bottom and around 375 milliseconds or so at the top. Okay, now I'm going to show you another distribution. I take another 500 duration measurements, and here the mean is 300 milliseconds, but the standard deviation is 8. 8 is smaller than what we had previously with 25. Again, we can look and see this is a normal distribution. We have the bulk of the measurements of durations peaking, the peak of this distribution is at 300 milliseconds, and that's around, we have about 125 right around 300. And then if you look, we're tapering off by about 275 here and maybe 325 here. So pretty much all the measurements of these 500 durations are between 275 and 325 milliseconds. So if we look at this, this is like our sort of our curve imposed, this is like our analog version, and then if we compare our two distributions, these are on the same scale from 250 to 350 milliseconds, you can see on the scale, same scale here. So what do you notice here? We have the mean is 300, and the standard deviation, as I said, was 25. And here, the skinny one, mean is still 300, but the standard deviation is 8. And so you can see, even though these distributions have the same mean, around 300, and they have the same shape, they peak around 300 and then they taper off, both of them. This one is a lot wider in spread than this one, which is a lot skinnier. So these have the same mean, but they have different spreads. We might refer to this as having a wider or a larger spread, and this one as having a narrower or a smaller spread. So why does this come into play when we're thinking about comparing durations between imitative vocal fry and normal voice stimuli? Well, it comes into play in the following way. So I told you that the mean word duration for normal stimuli was 600 milliseconds, and the mean word duration for vocal fry stimuli was 650 milliseconds. but I didn't tell you anything about the spread. So maybe the spread of the durations we measured looked like this and this. And so you can see that there's some overlap here in the distributions. So there's some number of vocal fry stimuli who had durations around, let's say, 625 and below, quite a few of them. And for the normal stimuli, there's also quite a few that have some 625 milliseconds or longer. So there's overlap in the distribution between normal and vocal fry. Compare this to if, again, we still had the normal voice stimuli having a mean of 600 milliseconds, and the vocal fry stimuli having a mean of 650 milliseconds, but they're a lot tighter, narrower spread distributions. So in this case, we taper off to having almost no measurements of duration of opportunity that are above 625, and there are almost no vocal fry stimuli where the opportunity word has a duration smaller than 625. And so there's almost no overlap in the distributions compared to here where we have all this overlap. And so if we knew that we had widespread in the distributions, then we might not want to say that, we're sure that the vocal fry stimuli for opportunity are longer than normal. We'd be a lot more confident about saying that in this case where we have narrow spreads and we have almost no overlap between the distributions for the durations for the normal voice versus the vocal fry stimuli. So the same kind of reasoning comes into play when we're looking at box plots. So remember with box plots, here if I have the normal voice stimuli and then here's a box plot of durations, remember that this is showing the distribution of durations in a normal voice stimuli, where this is the 25th percentile, this line is the median, this is the 75th percentile. And same thing for the vocal fry, we have a box plot here. Now in this case, you can look at the boxes for the normal voice versus the vocal fry. They have no overlap. This box ends up here, this box ends up here. There's no overlap here between the boxes. And in this case, we would be likely to say that, yes, the vocal fry stimuli, they have durations greater than the normal. And that's because there's no overlap. So no overlap in the boxes. So no overlap in boxes. We would say, yes, the vocal fry stimuli do seem to be longer than the normal voice ones. Now, okay, consider now this case where, look, we have our box plots again, normal voice versus vocal fry. But this time you can see the boxes overlap right in this region. So here we have an overlap in boxes. But it's not too bad an overlap because you can see the median for the vocal fry is still above the box, the top of the box for the normal voice stimuli. So here we might say, yeah, maybe it's likely that the vocal fry stimuli are longer than the normal. But we're less sure than if there's no overlap in the box plot. So here there's overlap of boxes, but one of the median falls outside overlap. So what I mean by that is you can see here that yes, we have overlap in the boxes in this region of durations on the y-axis, but the median of the vocal fry is still above the box for normal. Similar kind of situation here where we have, again, these boxes overlap in this region of durations, but the median here for the normal voice stimuli is below the bottom of the box for vocal fry. So this is like the other situation here where we have an overlap of boxes, but the median falls outside the overlap because the median for the median here for the normal is still falling outside the overlap with the box from vocal fry. So here we might also just say that, yeah, maybe it's likely that vocal fry stimuli are longer than the normal, but we're definitely less confident than in this case where we had no overlap at all between the boxes. Okay, so finally let's come to a case where here, if we look at the overlap in the boxes here in the y-axis, they almost completely overlap here. So this is really not looking like there's going to be a difference in durations between vocal fry and normal. So we'd probably say that we think there's no difference between the durations for vocal fry versus normal. Because in this case, we have complete overlap. The medians, both of the medians are within the other conditions box. So this really doesn't look like we're going to find that we have found a difference between durations. So that's just to show you how we can think about overlap and spread in comparing the durations of, let's say, the normal versus the vocal fry stimuli to evaluate whether there actually is a difference between the durations. So here, with complete overlap in the boxes and with the medians also within the overlap of the boxes, we would likely conclude there's no difference in durations. In these two cases where the boxes do overlap here, but we see that the median, at least one of the median falls outside of the overlap with the other box, or in this case where there's overlap in the boxes, but this median here is still above where this box ends. In these cases, we'd say like the vocal fry duration is likely or probably bigger than the normal voice. And then in this case, this is a clear case where there's no overlap in the boxes at all. This one ends here, this one starts here. We're really sure that the vocal fry durations are bigger than normal. So this is why spread matters when you're thinking about comparing whether the durations are different between vocal fry versus normal.